Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah, thank you so much, Darlene, for being here today. I just want to introduce you and then I'll hand the mic away. Darleen Simkins, she's a management analyst with the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission. And like we mentioned earlier, she joined us back in October last year to share how Parks was using their customers' feedback to improve their services. And so she's back for part two of that conversation to teach us on customer journey mapping, just a great visual tool for y'all to understand your customer's experience so that you can identify barriers and create the best possible experience for every customer. So thank you again, Darlene, for being with us today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you too, Talia. You've been both a huge support in helping make this happen, and I'm so excited to be here today to talk more about customer journey mapping. I'm going to jump in. For those of you, just to get in the chat, how many of you were at the last presentation? And how many of you are kind of new to this? So I will go ahead and say, for those of you that missed the last presentation, it's worth taking a look at, but I will be reviewing some information today so that you will be able to move forward, even if you haven't seen the last presentation as well. So customer journey mapping is a tool for understanding and improving the customer experience. It's really, rather than a lot of other lean tools that are very much focused on our internal processes as workers, as state employees, as service providers, this really looks at it from the customer experience. And that journey may have points where it doesn't even involve our agencies and then involves our agencies again, or it may be something where we completely control throughout the process. But it really is the customer's journey and how the customer perceives of us and our service in that journey. So a little bit about me before we get started. I'm not going to read all this here, but I've been with state government for 27 years. I've been with 9 agencies, but the last 10 years I've been with Washington State Parks. My career and my education has very much been focused on communication and research and talking and working across differences. I do speak several different languages and I have surveyed in Spanish as well as English, but I also study other languages as well. In addition, although I'm definitely not very good yet, I'm currently trying to learn Arabic as well. So I've always trying to push myself to learn more and better reach out to everybody that we serve in Washington State. I actually grew up in a very small town in West Virginia, a place that no one's ever heard of. So I also understand the importance and how really integral park systems can be to small communities. As I grew up in a very small community that was very dependent on its state parks around it. So with that, I'm going to jump into a little bit about customer journey mapping and kind of like giving you sort of a framework here that customer journey mapping, I'm going to go into kind of the whole process, but I also would say even partially working on customer journey mapping can be really valuable. And this work should always be centered in your mission, obviously the work of your agency, those people that you serve, your customers, and then of course, those technical aspects of, how you collect data, how you, how you, how you collect data, how you analyze that data, and how you can present that data within those frameworks. So we're always going to be looking at this with this information. In this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the tools that we use for customer journey mapping, but I'm not going to go into those technical details because some of you may be using very different technical tools, but you definitely want to center that work kind of in those three spheres. So on customer journey mapping, as she mentioned, as Teresa mentioned, this is a 2-part series. The last one was in October. You can go back and look at those video presentations if you'd like, but as much as possible, I'll make sure that you can use this independently as well. And on that, we definitely focused on just the mapping that visitor journey at Washington State Parks. And here, we'll still be using Washington State Parks examples, but it's going to be more of a how to create a customer journey map and how to use it to improve the customer experience. And I'll talk a little bit about the choices that I made to do a customer journey map, but you'll be able to see other options as well that might work for you. So for those that weren't at the last presentation, really a customer journey map can be defined as a visual representation of the process customers, and I want to focus on that customers, follow when interacting with an organization or set of organizations. It's really their journey and they should always be that focus. I want to talk a little bit about journey map scoping as well before we get into like the full process of customer journey mapping and some of the pieces you want to consider when you're planning for customer journey mapping. So first, of course, with any customer journey, your customers generally have a goal. They're interacting for a reason. Maybe they want to go camping. That would be, our camping customers. They want to find a great campsite. They want to have a great camping experience. Or maybe they're there because they want to go fishing. And, we want to make sure that they have that great experience getting out and launching their boat and going out into the lake or whatever it is that they're doing. They have a clear goal in mind. And for customer journey mapping, you want to set a clear starting point where you start that journey. I'll go into stages, and there are set stages. So it's great when you can do a full customer journey mapping process. But even if your scope is not at that level, you want to be very clear about what point in the customer journey mapping you're starting at and what point you're ending at as you're doing this work. So that kind of defines the scope of the work. And I want to talk a little bit about customers and how we look at our customers, because I do something different than a lot of people do with their customer journey maps. A lot of groups will use personas and they'll recommend starting with personas. I don't use personas, I use segmentation. And I think it's worth it to consider which of these approaches you want to take, whether you want to focus on really seeing your customers through the lens of segmentation, or whether you want to see your customers through the lens of personas. And when I talk about this, I'm going to explain why it's worth considering this. Segmentation is really sort of the macro level of looking at your customers that kind of drills in. Personas is more of a micro level, and where you're creating a fictional persona that exemplifies perhaps a set of customers that you're trying to target or reach out to. For us at State Parks, we very much clearly in our mission state that we are serving all Washingtonians. So we want to be at that macro level and then drill in as we can, because we want to make sure that we're serving everybody across a whole set of different personal characteristics, for example. When you're doing segmentation, you start generally by grouping your already existing customers into segments that might be based on different product lines, which is generally how we do most of our segmentation. But then within that, we might segment by different usages, by demographics such as race and ethnicity, age, of course, and other characteristics as well. And so that is really when you're doing a segmentation and you're approaching it from the segmentation level, you're really doing a lot of qualitative research. You already have a lot of data on your customers. In our case, we have more than 35,000 customers a year who are taking our surveys. So we have a broad depth of data. We can do that full segmentation process. And for us, that's very important to build on that value. With personas, they're built more on qualitative research. They're often using focus groups, but good personas should also be built on preliminary segmentation work. So if you haven't done that work already, I think starting with segmentations makes sense, and then moving forward in your choices there. So at one of these days, I would love to be kind of in a debate panel group of people who use personas versus segmentation. But I think it's really worth kind of looking at, where you want to start in that understanding of your customers. If you haven't done that deep work of trying to understand your customers, I think either place to start makes sense, but you want to be intentional in this work. You also want to be intentional, when you're doing segmentation versus personas of what you're going to do with this data. So in our case, we already have a lot of systems that allow us to test the customer experience both through perception and also through action. But those tend to be segmented by product lines. So it makes sense to use segmentation for us because it allows us to then test whatever we've perceived from the customer journey mapping. For example, if we identify a pain point that customers are analyzing, and then we take an action to kind of treat that pain point, we have an option to then look at that data based on that segment. So it's helpful to be able to like think to the long term and think to your change process of what's really going to work best for you. Um, I will say too, segmentation is more likely to be used when you're doing service delivery or you're doing marketing of your products. It tends to work really well for those situations. And we, of course, are very much doing that here at State Park. So we're a service oriented organization that wants to get the word out about our parks. Um, for people doing more types of specialized design work, personas are often a useful source as well. So you really want to look again, it comes down to that mission. What's your agency's mission? What are you going to be doing with the data? Who are the customers? What information can you glean from them? And what technology do you have to allow you to use either segmentation or personas in the way that makes the most sense for your agency? Does anybody have any questions about that one before I go on? That's a little different than I think a lot of people approach it. Have we got anything in the chat? Teresa, do we have anything in the chat on this one, or should I just move on?
Being no so far.
Okay, perfect. Then we're going to go into the stages of customer journey mapping, and I'll show you kind of what those look like at state parks for one of our business lines, one of our largest ones. On our stages, generally speaking, customer journey map might have between 4 to 6 stages. You might have a smaller scope if you're looking at something very specific, but in general, that's what you would have. And they generally come out to, and you may name them differently depending on the process you have, but there's generally a stage around awareness, a customer becoming aware of that product. That might involve marketing or other things that bring them to come to your agency or consider your agency. And then also there's that consideration piece of, and again, I think for some agencies, this may be different than others. If you have an awareness of a need at Department of Licensing that's very specific to say your driver's license, getting a new license or something of that nature, you might not be considering other options because there really aren't other options for you. Or maybe there are. You really want to like think through that business process and what you're trying to do here. But for us, no one has to come to a state park. People choose to come to state parks. We offer that service to everyone, but that's not something that is required of anyone to come to a state park to meet a particular required need on the regulatory side. So for us, consideration is a very important piece of on a stage we definitely look at. You also have acquisition, the act of, like you said, you went into a store for a reason, as Teresa mentioned, but then you left because something didn't work right in the acquisition side. And we definitely, we don't want that. We don't want that failure to complete a sale or a reservation or coming into the park and not knowing where to park and leaving, those kinds of things, that acquisition side. Then, of course, we look very much at use. What are you doing in our parks? Is that a great experience? We want that to be a great experience for you. Kind of all the other pieces really are those pieces that lead you to kind of the heart of it, being in the state parks, having that great customer experience. And then, of course, there's the reflection process that hopefully returns you back to awareness and takes you through a virtuous cycle. So I'll show you a little bit about what that's going to look like here. But at first, I also want to mention, as you're doing this process, there is information you're going to want to gather as you decide to do this. And the information you gather will look very different depending on your agency and what you have available to you and where you are on your customer journey. So you're going to ask yourself, what information do you already have on your customers? It could be web analytics. I think most people today have some level of web analytics. If you aren't sure about that, you can definitely talk to your web manager, your web developer for that. Call logs are really important. If you've got people who are answering calls, your information center, there's a lot of value there. Survey data, of course, that I work with pretty substantially. There's the transactional data. When those customers are making those sales, there's some level of transactional data that you may in your agency have and are able to use in combination with those other pieces of data. And then this one I can't say enough about. Doing this work with others, people like David Walter, people like the information center staff, all number of people in the field, really those observations from your customer facing staff. I cannot say enough how important they are. I sort of call in my work, I call these our customer leaders, these people who face the customers every day, who make decisions to make a better customer experience for our customers. And you can ultimately tell us with such depth how the customers are experiencing the services that they are directly providing to them. So that's a key piece that I can't say enough about, and why, of course, it's so important to have both those people that wear the hat at state parks and those people that support the people who wear our hats, the ranger hat as well, those people that are in the field or on the phone directly helping customers. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like for us at state parks. As I mentioned, we want to be data informed. So we have very specific transactional data from a number of transactional systems that we mostly have internally, but some of them are shared by other agencies. We've been surveying our customers for at least 69 years. We're very lucky. We have a lot of data from our customers. As I mentioned, more than 35,000 survey responses a year. We have a really dedicated customer information center, and they keep call logs, feedback forms. They sit very close to me, so I'm able to talk to them and learn a lot from them about how they can serve the customer. We have vehicle and trail counter data, so we're also able to see how people are moving around our parks, which is important when we're looking at how our customers are using the space. But again, that's not perfect data. You don't want to rely on that entirely. We have a lot of website and marketing analytics that we've kept and that we use when we're trying to reach out and market our customers and learn from them. And we also have just an incredible amount of staff knowledge. If you combine the knowledge of all of our staff, you would be talking about literally centuries of customer service experience across our system. And again, I can't say enough about how important that is in engaging in any of this work. So as I showed in the last one, I showed the example of the camping customer journey. I'm going to use that example again. This is the one that we've got the most detail on, and the one where I can show you the fullest and most kind of mature customer journey mapping that we have in our system. So if you saw the last presentation, we've been serving our customers for a very long time. You can see this old survey right here. This is from 1956. More than 10,000 campers took this survey back then. And today, this is an older version here, but not too old. We're adding new surveys all the time. We've got people taking our survey every single day of the year. And this every year for the last several years, we've been at more than 30,000 responses a year from our camping customers. So here is an example of our camping customer journey map. As I mentioned, you can kind of see those pieces at play. That awareness consideration piece is really this decision to visit process here. How people learned about the park, considered the visit, gathered information, and decided to visit. We combined those two in this case because we wanted to focus a little more on our reservation process and our park entry process. So this is basically that piece, that acquisition piece, where someone's coming in and considering that visit. It's so important that we get this right. And back when we did this original journey mapping, we were actually redoing this system, making some enhancements to the system. So it was really important to us to focus on these areas where we knew we were going to exact change. And again, obviously, if you already know you've got some big areas where you can make some substantial change, you may want to expand your stages in those areas and, combine others as well. But it really would be very dependent upon the processes that you have. For us at state parks, we have a physical process where people are entering the park and having a very physical experience, but we also have kind of a virtual experience as well. So I added this extra piece here. I call this Inside the Gates. And we ask kind of two questions about presence of staff and responsiveness to needs. So we wanted to be able to segment that piece here. And why that's so important is that we know sometimes the things that we do here, and especially the things we do in this reservation process, especially here, have an impact on how well people feel that they need to have a presence of staff and how responsive staff are to their needs. So it's important for us to be like, break these up for the work that we do, that it may be different for you. But you may want to think about that as well as you're doing kind of some of this work. And then of course, this is the use process, that park visit process happening here. And then for us, because we have had a lot of customers who have had some difficulty exiting our parks, we had a specific stage just for the park exit process as well. So that's kind of part of the use. Typically, you might not have a like, how do I get out? But that is very important for our visitors. And I'll kind of show some of those examples later. And then also extremely important, and I can't reflect enough that this is probably one you should have on most of your stages, is really thinking about that reflection process. What are the memories that people are carrying with them? Memories have a lot of power. And you want, of course, those memories to be very positive so you can have a decision to revisit again. Also, sharing experience is important. How can our customers share their experiences about their parks? And then ultimately, so they can decide whether to return. And we hope they will return and return often. So I'll jump into a little bit about how we kind of looked at that in more detail and how we're using that to affect change. So that decision to visit, as I mentioned here, learning about the park, considering the visit, gathering the information, deciding to visit. We have some very specific questions that we ask to kind of measure what that looks like. Same with that reservation process, the park entry, and some of the others. I'm going to skip here. So on the park entry, we actually ask a series of questions in our surveys about how they learned about the parks. And one of the big ones that we have, almost consistently, one of the most common is friends and family. So a lot of people have been coming to state parks because friends and family are talking about it. Friends and family are recommending a place. Maybe they've been coming there since they were little and they want to return. And then the other way that we see is the website. So for a newer visitor, that might be more likely to be the website. And for a lot of visitors, it might be family and friends as well. So those two in particular are very important. So having that, those mechanisms to look at both of those, and as well as other ways that people learn about parks. We also did a lot of work with our reservation ratings. A few years ago, we made enhancements, and we continue to try to make enhancements to our reservation system. I'm in the same division with the people who manage the reservation system, and we pull data from it. So it's very important to us that be a very positive experience for people, and that they're able to use our reservation system easily to find the sites they need and to reserve the sites. So we're always looking at the reservation in general. We're looking at, how well were you able to find that site that meets your need? And as you can kind of see here, we look at this information on a rating of 1 to 4. So 1 is very dissatisfied, 2 is dissatisfied, 3 is satisfied, and 4 is extremely satisfied. And the reason we use a 4-point scale rather than a 5-point scale, for one, we had some limitations with some of our other survey tools where we couldn't go past 5 points. That's no longer the case. But longitudinally, we've kept it this way so we can keep good trend data. But it was very important for us to have a not applicable choice as well for some of these features, because we found that when people didn't have a not applicable choice, they were tending to just put a choice in the middle, and that kind of skews the data when you've got things that are optional and things that aren't. So we made some significant overhauls on that a few years back. But each of these does have an NA option as well, although most people for these questions are not in the NA category. More so if they want to make changes to reservations. Obviously that has more people choosing NA here. We really look at this over time, and we look at, you'll notice there's definitely seasonal pieces here. When this is, of course, the period when sites are in very high demand. It's very easy to get a site in the winter, and as you can imagine, extremely difficult to get a site on Memorial Day or the 4th of July. And you can see that here as well. So we expect seasonal variation on something like this, but it's good to monitor it and monitor it across time so we can see how it changes. And as you can see here, if you scroll in on this, if it was in Power BI, you'd see this more readily. I've got this in the PowerPoint here. You can also see that detail. So, I want to know what this dip looks like. I want to know what July looks like. So I'm able to go and scroll in and look at this at a greater level of detail. So I can see, year over year, how are we doing when it comes to ability to get a site in the 4th of July, because that's going to look very different than January or February. So now I'm going to look at this kind of park entry process. This is very important when we're looking at customer journey mapping. So we looked at some of these different pieces. As you see here, we try to use a very specific process where it's an arrow following one arrow to the other. We didn't just guess on this. We went through and we actually followed the process in Canvas. Like, how do you get to the sales channel? Go to the sales channel. We search for the site in the system. We select the site. We complete the reservation. So we really went through like that customer journey experience. And I recommend anytime you start journey mapping, or really honestly for me, anything that I do, the first thing I'm going to do is like try to be the customer, try to do that goal, going back to that goal. So I go to the goal, I go to whatever starting point I've made the scope. Like sometimes the starting point might be at awareness, sometimes it might be kind of later in at the sales channel, but I go to that starting point that I've set as my scope. And then I literally go through and try to do what they're doing. And you'd be amazed at how much you can predict by how well occupied something is based on how easy or hard that customer journey is. I've been amazed to see that even small improvements in the customer journey can result in significantly higher sales of even individual sites. So we definitely know that customer journey matters, and it matters to whether or not they're going to complete a reservation and ultimately come to our park. So it's super important. And then once they get here, obviously we want that to be a very positive experience for them. Getting to the park actually is an interesting one because we find that there were a lot of issues with signage, and we're currently on a process to really make some improvements to our signage. People want to be able to get into the park, and they want to be able to find where they can park their cars if they're not staying at a site, or they want to know where their site is and get to that site. And there's some opportunities for signage improvements there. There's also opportunities for the camping customer for us to give better instructions when they're completing that reservation. So they don't have to rely quite as frequently on park staff to get where they're going. So we did some work around responsive to your needs, and we know that these results have consistently been some of our highest. Our employees are incredible assets to our customers. Our customers in general give them very high ratings. And when there are issues, a lot of times there are issues that can be dealt with kind of upstream as well. So we want to give that support to people like David McWalter and others who are out there every day serving our customers. So we're looking at things like how responsive are we to their needs. Obviously, there's the importance of wearing the ranger hat and being in uniform, being courteous. Security is extremely important. And we look at that presence of park personnel and feeling welcome as well. So those are pieces we look at in context and over time. We also look at, when we look at that visit process, this one in particular, you notice we use arrows here. Sometimes there's that piece where it can just sort of happen whenever, or you can choose to do a plethora of things when you're in the park. So the order that a particular customer does these things is of course going to differ. So we didn't put arrows here, but we put kind of like major things that people are going to do with camping customers in the park. So they're going to obviously want to eat. Most of them are going to want to eat in the park. Some of them are going to want to eat outside the park, but they're going to acquire, prepare, and eat food. And that's really important. That has to be something they can do well. If they are expecting to use the fire pits, but they can't find the firewood, that's a real problem for them. And we want to make sure we're able to address that and see that. They want to be able to settle in and relax as well. Sleeping is very important. Being able to shower and use the restroom, find access to park locations and recreational activities. And on things like this, a lot of people will use emojis to kind of look at like how satisfied or happy or frustrated our visitors are. You can't see this here because this is just an image of the Power BI. But in our customer journey mapping, we don't use emojis. We use actual customer words, because we have, out of the more than 30,000 people who take our surveys every year, we get more than 15,000 comments. And so we have the luxury of having comments that really represent those emotions or those experiences. And for us, that's a lot more powerful than just putting up a smiley face. I'm putting up a real comment from real visitors. So I'll share what a couple of those look like. So on the get to the park entry process, we would have liked there to be more signage directing us as we enter the park. So very specific. There's a little frustration there, but really they just want that signage to get to the park. For something like sleep, which could be a little more frustrating when there's a pain point there. Other campers didn't follow the rules for quiet time for their generator usage. Why should I be the one to enforce your rules? Where's park staff? And you can hear that frustration. I want some help. I want to be able to sleep. I want it to be quiet. I want you to enforce your rules. This is, a very kind of clear, more telling piece of information than just putting up an emoji without frustration, or putting, something of that nature in place. For shower and restroom usage, this is one where putting a very specific comment allowed us to make some changes. We used to have shower tokens in most of our park system, and now a lot of that, we've changed that quite a bit. And we used to get a lot of these comments. This was super common. When I checked in, they should have told me I needed tokens for the shower. I had to walk a mile in the rain to your park office to get tokens. And I know it sounds funny to say a mile in the rain, but we actually had a lot of people who were very descriptive about having to walk a mile in the rain, having shampoo in their hair, and realizing they needed tokens. These kinds of levels of frustration. That tells a very different story than just, again, putting up a sad face or a frustration face. I'll read a couple more here as well. Settle in and relax. While leaving the park to go explore, we left our propane fireplace out and it was stolen. So, that's another piece of that where, making sure we understand the settle and relax is about making sure that I'm safe in the park, making sure that my belongings are safe when I'm camping in the park, whether or not I'm in my campsite or not. So that, tells us something about security and, again, what kinds of presence they need and the kind of policing or patrolling that we might need to be doing in the park as well. And again, these are pain points. We have a lot of great positive responses as well, but I wanted to share some of these pain points in there. And then kind of moving to the park exit process, I'll talk a little more about some of these. Decide to leave, linger, or extend the stay. That may be one where you don't think there's going to be a lot of pain points, but mostly these were centered around things like, they told me to go to the office at such and such time to find out if there was a cancellation for the next day. I showed up and they didn't get there for another half hour, or those kinds of things that we might have in place. So how do we, what can we do to better offer people opportunities to find out about and extend their stays? And so, obviously we can focus on that one incident of somebody not getting to the office right in time, and that we can do in the moment, and that's important. But we also focused on how can we make it so they don't have to do this as much. And so we've actually moved to same-day reservations. And same-day reservations has been one of those ways that we've been able to help improve that process to extend their stays. And we've actually seen some improvements in occupancy through that as well. So really allowing people to not have those experiences of having to get up early in the morning and go up there in the first place. I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of these overall satisfaction ratings as well. I know you've seen kind of like these pieces that we very consistently keep the same. So all of these ratings are the same ratings. We can compare them across groups. Some of these ratings are used for all of our product lines. Generally, overall experience. Most of the time, value is always there as well. And then campsite condition, this might change to buoy or moorage condition. It might change to some other type of condition based on what it is that you're staying at the park for. But again, we tend to want to understand how they feel about the condition, how they feel about the price they paid, how they feel about their experience, restrooms, of course, as well, and general park experience. And then signage. As you can see, we got a lot of people asking about signage. We've got a lot of people with wayfinding needs as well. So we focus on those in more detail because as we understand more about our visitors and their needs. One thing I definitely want to mention here, and we are extremely lucky as we do this work, is that our visitors spend more time taking our surveys than we have staff dedicated to analyzing them. We get the equivalent of more than 2 FTE a year of time is spent by customers taking our surveys. And that is a huge gift. And we always want to make sure that we are super, super responsive to helping them really make a difference in their experience with the time and the effort that they give us. And I'm sure David could tell you there's a lot more that our customers are telling us directly as well. So really combining those pieces at play. And now I want to spend just a little bit of time connecting kind of that customer journey map process to service, because ultimately you are spending this time constructing a customer journey map for a reason. You want to make a change happen. Either you want to market better to your customers, you want to do a better job serving them, you want to understand maybe how to provide the most appropriate pricing. There's just a number of, there should be a purpose behind that customer journey map. So it's important, I think, to connect it back to service. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. And ultimately, again, you want to involve the people who are working directly with the customers, those customer leaders in that process. So here, I kind of like, after we built the map, after we've looked at this information, what are we going to do with this? What are some of the pieces at play? And I want to mention too, these are not exactly perfect. Park staff answer lots of calls up here. People at the information center sometimes get calls down here. This is not to say that there's no work, there's no cross work, because there certainly is. But this is a general sense of like where people and customer facing folks are going to be seen in these different levels, and where, again, they can make those better observations about the customer experience from their firsthand service perspective. And I call these customer service leaders because I think it's really important. They're the people who interact with customers before, during, and after they enter the gates of our parks. And the reason why I like to call them leaders is they are people who can make decisions in the moment to make the customer's experience better. But we also want to support them so that they can minimize decisions they shouldn't have had to make in the first place. And they can also be supported to, again, serve our visitors as well as they can. And then I kind of bring this up here because it's not so much a person, but it's still a part of that process. Surveys, follow-up, communications, and social media. So, we want to have these groups working together to kind of make sense of this customer journey mapping. And a couple of things that we've done, we learned a lot from the surveys about why people didn't like tokens. We reduced the number of tokens and need for tokens for showers. We're currently working on a process, not so much with camping, but with our Discover Pass day use visitors to do a better job of providing signage to our parks. We know they struggle to find parking. They struggle to find where pay stations are. So we're making an effort to do a pilot project to improve that. And then we're going to test that and look at how that looks, not just with survey data, but also with transactional data as well. So getting to the park, getting oriented, and then either paying or in this case, checking into the site. So, and again, it's important to use cross-organizational teams to really look at this. Again, another thing that we have started to do, and that I'm working on in more detail, is really connecting this customer journey map to a larger customer service blueprint. Again, these would be like this front stage here, the line of interaction. This is the customer journey. This is what the customers are experiencing. This line of interaction here, I'm calling it the front stage. This is where your customer service leaders interact with the customer directly. And in some cases, there's also a backstage here. We might have someone who's providing support to that person. And then you also have, and I'm not able to see because of my systems in the back, like supporting processes, like our central reservation system, for example. It sits way back here. There are people here who have, impact on that. But ultimately, there's the customers directly interacting with our website, the customers directly interacting with our central reservation system. So making sure those interfaces are good as well. So really connecting those pieces to the customer and mapping all of that out at that front line of visibility, what they would call responsive staff, at that back end, so that these people are supported so they can be as responsive as possible. And then what are those supporting systems that are helping them, or that may be isolated and could be helping them as well. And just to give you a sense of what that's kind of looking like in the moment, you saw the question on value. What's your value for price paid? We're currently in the process of obviously reviewing a number of our fees. And that's a process we obviously do on a cyclical basis, but we had a long period of very low inflation. So we were able to not make a lot of changes to our fees over a long period of time. And now we're in a period of higher inflation and lower general fund support. So we have to look at a lot of these fees more specifically. So we're kind of looking at them and like, how can we map these fees to shared customer journeys? So an example of that would be the camping that you see here. What are some different things that a camping customer is also doing to pay? Like they might have a reservation fee with camping. They might choose to have an extra vehicle fee. They might have a trailer dump, which is not a fee they have to pay. It's included in what they already have. And they might have maybe a couple other as well. So we're trying to like connect a lot of these fees into different shared customer journeys to kind of understand them as the customer sees them. Because when you sit here and you look at these giant list of fees, it's a lot of fees. And it may not be always obvious how many different kinds of fees that we have in state parks for different purposes. And I do want to tell you, not all of these fees would ever be in any one person's customer journey. No person does all this or has to pay all these fees. But by having a better connection of really everything from fees to transactional systems and how they impact that customer experience and that customer journey is really valuable to helping us to do that work better. In addition to doing the customer experience work, I also do a lot of the work around fee assessment and fee development. And going through a customer journey process, whenever I need to assess a fee, I will go through that process again with that customer and see how it is for them. So when we do have to adjust a fee or raise a fee, if we have opportunities to also improve how that fee can be perceived or understood by the customer, that's an opportunity for us to do that as well. And I would suggest like that is something you should really be thinking about for really any significant process or change that you're making for your customers. So we recently did an adjustment to our roofed accommodations, and in that adjustment, they were priced individually, but also very similarly to one another based on certain amenities. But that wasn't really clear to the customer, and it wasn't really obvious in any of the categorization of those prices. So we're moving to having a set of fees that are specific for certain types of roofed accommodations that are very specific based on the amenities, so that the customer can see exactly what they're paying for and what they're not easily. And hopefully, even though we had to make an adjustment to the fee, the customers obviously don't want to pay more. We can at least make that adjustment and also make some improvements so that the customer will have a better experience going forward. So with that, I know I brought up a lot of information about customer journey mapping, how to build a customer journey map, and how you might use it to solve customer service problems or challenges. Does anyone have questions for me?
Awesome presentation, Darleen. While folks are thinking about an answer, just want to jump back to a question that David had asked earlier today when you were talking about segmentation versus personas. He had asked what degrees of personas are there that maybe that you've utilized as well.
Thousands.
I've actually been pretty strongly in the segmentation camp. So I haven't used personas. I know others have. Typically with a persona, what I've seen in state parks is they'll employ a focus group and they'll employ a persona based on that focus group. I have the luxury of not only having the full sort of access to the customer segmentation data and the surveying, but I can drill way in there that data. So I tend to not, with such a wealth of segmentation data at my disposal, and also because the only way that I can evaluate and test change is through sort of is through those same segments, those same product segments. It just for me makes sense because I want to make sure anything that comes out of the research and then is applied at state parks, we can go back in and test, did it work? Was it effective? Because we really limited dollars here at state parks. We often can't we very, very seldom are we able to just implement across our whole system. We have a very diverse system. And so we often have to do things sort of piecemeal and then test, did they work? Are they effective? And for me, that's just, overwhelmingly the business reason why I want to be able to really, really quickly test it. And if I've started with segments, my ability to test those segments is almost instantaneous compared to having to build a whole new system that I don't have the staff resources or ability to build. So for me, it's been entirely segmentation on my end, but for very, very clear business reasons.
Thanks for that clarification. I was just curious because personas, when I hear persona, I think of lots and lots of different attitudes and ideas, and your answer is great because it's scientifically based upon comments that are received, analysis of feedback. I like how you don't use emojis. That makes me feel a lot better. That it's hard to. It's like when you go to the doctor. How do you feel? You get the meh emoji. It's like, what the hell does that mean? But I think that's really very cool. And no, from the front line, it's often with short staff. It's like almost we're moving from triage to triage, whack-a-mole, and it's from dealing with vandalism to people that are happy to be here for the first time to helping someone that has a complaint. So it's every day is different, but it's cool to see that there's analysis happening at this level. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. And I want to make a shout out to David too. There are two people who are like most frequently mentioned in very positive ways in our customer comments, and David is one of them. So I really appreciate you coming to the presentation today, and I know your commitment to customer service because we hear about it from our customers. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Just by knowing you for an hour, David, I feel that is very true.
Well, it's just simple. You say good morning, good afternoon. You welcome people to your neighborhood, which is our park. And sadly, those are skills that have been lost. the pandemic really put a gut blow to all those social skills that people forgot. And we have a generation of young kids that I see Ranger story time that I'm teaching those skills like eye contact, turning on your flipping camera when you're in a presentation. Don't be that icon. And I don't go to a lot of these. Darlene's a pro. I mean, well done presentation. But
Yeah.
it when you're online, we sadly have those things where we don't interact because you're like, another YouTube or another Zoom or another Teams meeting. The social skills of customer service are very, very, very simple. And it's acknowledgement. It's acknowledgement of place, it's acknowledgement of the person, but it's also responding to those basic complaints of like, the hot water didn't last the whole time. Oh, we can fix that. Let me go on the pipe chase. I'll turn it on. You can have unlimited hot water. And now, thankfully to the new director, folks in Washington State Parks can have a shower till the cows come home. That's how it went. So with the Discover Pass, you come into a park and take a hot shower. So yeah, cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's just amazing being able to reconnect folks with nature. I think that kind of really brings it all like full circle back to, who we are and where we belong. So this is just wonderful work. So thank you so much, David, for your service and just being able to care about your customers deeply in order to respond, to their needs and barriers and frustrations. You guys are doing some amazing work there. And I just love seeing just the first survey, Darlene, that you shared, with us and just seeing how it has evolved over the years to what it is now is so amazing. If anyone has any questions, please feel free, raise your hand, use the chat. But one question I had while we were just waiting, Darlene, when you were kind of walking us through your journey and the kind of specific milestones, if for lack of better words, that a customer would go through in order to visit the park. You were also reading kind of some of the survey responses that you were getting. So I was curious, do you kind of connect some of your survey questions to the process that your customers would go through? So you can kind of get that like good data to kind of pinpoint where those frustrations and barriers are?
I'm going to share something here. Let me see if I can bring this in. Let's see if I can bring this in. This is not on my PowerPoint, so I'm going to see if I can just bring this in here and let people see this. This is something from a couple of years ago, but the model is still used. So all these questions form a model. Like nothing here is accidental. And this is older. This is an older report. But the model's right here. So this idea of overall park experience and value. These questions are the questions that we call like inside the gate questions, but they're obviously affected by things outside the gate. These are very much things that staff can impact in a very direct way, field staff. These are things that, we may need organizational leaders to support field staff with. Signage, obviously, is one of those. Maintenance, campsite conditions, changes like the not having the tokens that were so frustrating to so many people. Those kinds of supports in place. And then this is kind of set here as separate, the concession one. But really, and then having this clear and consistent metrics that we can compare them to. They're all exactly the same. In SurveyMonkey, we use SurveyMonkey Enterprise, which is a more robust form of SurveyMonkeys. We have a lot of responses, and we were grandfathered into a pretty good rate on that. So we get a good rate on that. We've been customers with SurveyMonkey for a long time. We have a survey bank. So if people want to pull questions, these type of questions from this model in, they don't have to guess or like accidentally get them wrong. They're already in their system. They can already pull them. and then adapt them as they need to for very specific product lines. And then we have, of course, these very additional demographic shared questions that we'll ask people that are very specific for us. So this model is in place, and some surveys have other questions as well, but we have a very clear model of like how we can look at and view our metrics as well. And when you asked about kind of the things I was reading off from, we have on our Power BI, and this is actually Power BI, you can read these. They're in a little bit of a small type, but you can actually hover over and read these individual comments. So they're not just, now I'm reading them obviously for this presentation, but people can go in and actually hover over them and see them. And I'm working on making some enhancements to this. I did a presentation with the Power BI users group, which I'll provide a link in the chat to that. If you wanted to use this exact software, this technology, how you could build something like this for yourself. But I'm actually making some enhancements to this that'll make changes to this as well. So I'd be happy to share information about the group for those that want that. Yes, we do. Everything is very intentional. We look at this with the lens to get as much information as possible. And we even look at greater detail than I mentioned here, like showing pictures of things that might be issues where signs aren't really working because of the environment. Can't really see what's going on here, but that's a pay station. We want people to be able to see it well. And even drilling down into things like, we noticed this really has to do more with a first-time visitor. If you've been to the park before, you don't need to be told where this is. You already know. So of course, this rating looks higher. So when you really drill down into these ratings, you see, oh, this is even a bigger problem than we might think. Because this might look like a fine rating, but this is not so great. And this is less great too. We want all of our visitors to be able to do and find things. So we are actually working on a pilot project specifically to improve how people can find these pay stations so that they can, and how they can find the parking lots in general and their sites. So there's a lot more detail that we provide than I went into here, but really everything is intentional and everything has a very clear process of what you're going to do with it and how you're going to analyze it. Because for me, I don't want to collect data that I'm not going to do anything with. And I don't want to collect data that I can't then test how it's changing and that what we did makes change happen. So we want to be as specific as possible in how we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. First step really is like, what do we really want to know? So
yes,
in order to ask the right question, right?
Yes. And I want to make sure that, this is a more mature customer service system. This was not built overnight. So it starts with where you're at and really your mission, your technology, and the customers you're serving.
Yeah, you guys have had a long time to work on this and get it perfected. So absolutely. Shannon asked in the chat when you were sharing about just your model there, if it would be possible to just share a copy of that. I know you mentioned that one was maybe an old dashboard, but just as a helpful reference, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. And I think too, different models for change. Like sometimes we'll pull, like when we're going to make a change, we'll look at this and we'll say, okay, we're going to look at this piece. We're going to do this piece. So then we might look at, for example, if we're making a change to price, we're going to look at, what happened in that value question. If we're making a change to signage, we're obviously going to look at signage. But we're not just going to look at the satisfaction data. We're also going to look at, in this case, we have a unique situation. We're directing you to signage that involves a transaction. So I have the ability to literally measure, did that pay station actually get more business as a result of the signage? So we have that satisfaction of signage, and then we have the actual data of completion, which is kind of unique because that's looking at both. So often we think of being only able to track this kind of data on the web, but you can also track it in the physical environment if you've got a place where there's a transaction occurring.
Old school. Let's to say.
Yeah, using all the tools.
Yeah, I love it. A lot of folks are also asking for the Power BI user group link. So happy to share that. Darlene mentioned earlier. Chad, excuse me, did ask Darlene, what is your response rate for the customer surveys that you
So our response rate varies based on the customer segment. When I first came to parks, we did not, and this is very helpful. I'm glad you asked that question. It's really, really important when you're doing your surveying that you do as much as possible to find out who is and who is not taking your survey. So when I came to parks in 2016, we called the overnight survey the customer survey, but I noticed it had a clear pattern. And I did some investigation and I put collector IDs on everything to see what was going on. And what I found was that 99.9% of campers, of the surveys were coming from campers. And that is basically a camping survey. And we were doing other things to get people to take the survey, but they weren't working. And it really wasn't a customer survey, that particular survey. So we retooled that and really made it into an overnight survey. When we retooled it to really work for that group, we made one change, and that change resulted in an increase in responses from 10,000 a year to 30,000 a year. And now about 10% of campers take the survey. And that change was making sure that, and I'll back this up because I think this is a really useful point to back up on. The next day, the very next day, we were giving the survey like once a week in the peak and on a certain lesser basis in the off season. We worked with the vendor, the reservation system vendor, who's already been sending the messages all along. They already have a trusted relationship. We added one extra message. Would you take the survey? And we added it right here. Before it was like happening in different parts. We moved it to right here. That rate overnight went from 10,000 to 30,000. So that timing really matters. Where you ask questions really matters. And getting it in the right place gets you the best results and gets you significantly more engagement from exactly the same customers. So that was huge. And then we focused on other methods to get the other responses. So camping is our most robust group. They're our most engaged group. They answer the most surveys. So we use them as kind of the central group. And then we use a lot of the other surveys and we do a lot of comparisons back and forth between them to see, you know, how they're the same and how they're different. So we can basically understand them, what's the same for everybody and how they vary. In some areas, they're very, very similar and others are very different. But we, with our Discover Pass customers, and we're only able to survey those that we're selling to through the www.discoverpass website. Those are they're not the 10%. They're closer to like 3 to 5%. But those are another group that we survey as well. And then to reach kind of other groups, we'll do sometimes a special purpose survey, like we're preparing one for our mortgage customers right now. You know, we're not able to reach them all the time, but we want to get as much data as we can from them. And then we will occasionally go out and do roving point in time surveys at various parks. That's the most expensive method of surveying, so we can't do it as frequently, but we will go out and get that as well to try to get a greater number of visitors and then do comparisons between them. So there's a lot of work that we do to try to reach out to people. But the key is make sure you know who's taking your survey. And with SurveyMonkey, we use what's called a collector ID. And I'm very generous in using as many collector IDs for all the different ways that we collect data on these surveys, because it really, really matters when it comes to understanding who and who is not taking your survey. And the good news is if you have customer segments that are taking your survey at different rates, so campers are only 5% of our visitors, right? But they're the vast number if you take our surveys. If you're going to report about satisfaction, breaking that up in those segmentations makes a ton of sense, right? And if you've got various different kind of groups taking a survey, like sometimes we have planning surveys where they're overwhelmingly one set of groups more than another, and the results are very different, you can then show that data by those different segments, right? Instead of showing it as like, oh, 75% of people responded this. Well, but if it doesn't accurately represent all of your groups the same, then you want to break that up and show those segments by satisfaction. And that really breaks it down that way. So, we're being very thoughtful about presenting the data as accurately as possible to represent the overall scope of our visitors. I guess that's another reason why segmentation is so critical for us.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Darleen. I have a couple more questions around the survey, and then I'll jump back up to Paul's question. But Bonnie was curious, do you have a paper survey too? And if so, are those incorporated into or treated as standalone to the digital results?
We've moved away from paper as much as possible because it's very hard to manage. And in this digital age, most people, I think, prefer just something simple coming to them. One thing, I've been doing survey work for probably a quarter century now. And typically the response rate when you're able to push a survey to someone versus make it a passive survey is significantly less. So in this day and age, people tend to do better when they get that survey sent to them by someone they already have a trusted relationship with. And typically being able to do it on your phone is for a lot of people just really easy these days versus a piece of paper. We do have paper comment forms, and I think some of the parks use those. David, do you still use any paper feedback at Dry Falls?
Do we get them? Oh yeah, but do we officially have them? No.
No. Yeah, it's just very difficult. We're very under-resourced, so it's very difficult and time-consuming to manage. But just the data entry involved and the scrubbing involved in paper surveys. Early in my career, I did a lot of paper survey work, and I know we had, not at Parks, but at another agency, we had to hire full staff just to scrub that work. I've done work with Bubbatrons from schools in the past, and it just having this online in a controlled system just makes it so much easier to administer.
I will have to say your wisdom of having trained camp hosts that have done the surveys in the field are probably the smartest thing, because those folks are of an age, grayness and stuff like that it makes them approachable to be able to provide gather that information, where a lot of people, unfortunately nowadays, again, post-pandemic, they're hesitant to, why is this young person asking me these questions? Are they trying to sell me something, or what's their agenda? And all in all, it's really to make things better. But that's the biggest hurdle, is that questions often lead to what? And bottom line is to make things better. But people don't, unfortunately, trust that sometimes, unless it's coming from a person wearing a green vest, a host vest, all that kind of stuff. So I know firsthand here at Dry Falls, we had some really good folks that were like, are you guys going to do that again? I'm like, yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually have a very specific protocol for when we're going out in the field and doing intercept surveying, or what we call in-park surveying, where we do a roving process in one region at a time. And due to budget constraints, we've done less of that than we've done in the past, but we're doing that as we can do that and manage that across the system. So we have a very specific protocol. Our survey hosts have got to wear their vests. It's not an optional thing. They've got to be obviously identifiable Parks employees. Any Parks employee that goes out and surveys needs to be in a uniform of some sort, whether it's their T-shirt. Even I have like a park T-shirt that kind of looks like a park aide, so I'm not a ranger. And when I go out there, I also have my Parks gear on. So if anyone ever asks you to take a survey and they're not obviously clearly in a uniform, then that is not us. And they have not been authorized by us to take a survey, to administer a survey on our behalf, because you always know when anyone asks you to take a survey, they're going to either be in a very clear volunteer vest or they're going to be in some sort of uniform with Washington State Parks. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah,
Yes.
good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
So one really quick question about surveys, and then Paul had a really great question, so I want to get to that. But B was just asking, do you survey in multiple languages?
We do. We have surveyed in English and Spanish. I am multilingual, so I have the ability. In the early days, I even coded the back end in Spanish. So we have with SurveyMonkey Enterprise the ability to expand beyond more than just the languages that I feel confident administering directly. We have the ability to survey and bring in to download English language survey questions and send them directly to translation. And I've been trying to encourage people in the agency to take advantage of that opportunity to do that work, because that's a lot easier than the old days where I had to like go in and create sort of 2 separate surveys and then combine them in Power BI and then do all the back end analysis and the translation back. It's a lot of work. So this system's a lot easier. SurveyMonkey does a lot of that work for you. And then again, that's with SurveyMonkey Enterprise. So it's just a lot easier than it used to be to do translation and multi-language surveying. So my hope is to do a lot more of it in the future.
Yeah. Awesome, very cool. Paul was asking, well, he mentioned he loves the database scientifically studied approach that y'all are taking there. How does Parks specific divisions or programs there actually get prioritized and take on those improvements implicated or revealed by the data that you have?
So there's a couple of different things here. We make that data available on Inside Parks so that any employee can look at it. And I refresh that. The camping data gets refreshed every single month. So every month you'll have fresh data that you can look at. For me, it's really important for the people who can directly, those customer service leaders, to be able to directly see the impacts of what they're doing on a daily basis, whether or not the rest of the organization is making change. So to me, making that data as broadly available to people as possible is really important. We also have a few different work groups who are currently using that data in very specific ways. As I mentioned, we're doing a signage pilot because we know we've got some signage issues to deal with. I'm a part of that group. I help to work on the evaluation plan and different pieces of data that we're going to be using to evaluate that. I also, I'm the person who does a lot of the fee assessments, for our agency, and I use customer experience, condition, and satisfaction with value data all the time to see how people are responding. It's been really interesting because we have seen differences in changes in satisfaction ratings and in satisfaction overall across our different fees. And if you were, I don't want to go into too much detail about all this, but if you say, for example, I think Department of Revenue would know, if you've done a lot of price elasticity modeling, you can look at some of those models and then you can bring them across to our satisfaction data and it ties in. I mean, it very much is reasonable. So it's kind of an early warning sign of like how well are customers tolerating price, how in demand is this service that we're providing. And at one point when we saw inflation go up, but we hadn't raised our prices yet, we actually saw satisfaction. That was what was really shocking to me. I didn't think customers were so sort of intuitively in touch with inflation, but it looked like it when we had large inflation before we were able to increase our rates. We saw a period where our satisfaction with rates was going up maybe faster than it should have been because we couldn't raise in time to meet the service costs we had. So it's really interesting to see how astute our customers are and how that really comes out in their satisfaction data with just all aspects of parks. I always think there's way more we could be doing with it than we are doing, but we are a small under-resourced agencies. So we want to, be as thoughtful as we can, and also make that data available to everybody to use in a myriad of ways.
Great. I love that you are actually using the customer data as a way to prioritize. Like, this is a service that's really high in demand. There's a barrier. We need to work on it. That's amazing. Awesome. Any other questions? We just have 5 minutes left, but time well spent.
Yes, I should add, the last picture you see there, that's one of our survey hosts. He was in Southwest. It's not the survey host who you worked with, David, but that's one of our survey hosts right there. And that's a typical vest that you might see. And he's taking a look out at Beacon Rock while they're, so you can see, I don't know if you can see in the background, the visitors are actually sitting there taking the survey. We're obviously right there by them. We use iPads for our intercept surveying. We'll give them a little space. Obviously, we don't want to stand like crouch right in front of them, but we always stay there by the iPad.
No, I've loved your photos. Your photos have been fantastic. Well done.
Thank you. Well, it's our photos, so I'm very lucky to have the great
You're welcome.
state parks to get these great photos from.
I have a question. If there's anyone left on the line who didn't previously have journey mapping experience, does this kind of give you an idea on how to jump into mapping that all out, or do you have any questions on how to get started? I see a thumbs up. Thank you, Jennifer. Teresa, it's funny. Earlier you were reading my mind, like, okay, how do things connect? Thank you, Hannah and Debbie. And yeah, and I just it helped me to see, Darlene, the swim lanes, how you chunked out the phases of a process. And I think it was inspiring to me because now when we go forward, we can chunk out those phases of a process, ask questions in our survey specific to certain steps in those processes as you did. And then I'm thinking, because we're really visual over here, I love how you hover over the boxes and you've got the comments. And I was thinking, sorry, y'all, I'm just thinking out loud, but hopefully it does somebody else some good. But, if you're asking questions specific to those steps in the process, you can then, to your question, Teresa, of connecting it, you could bring it over to the map and kind of get some averages, and then put it like that little average summary blurb over the block boxes, but also outline the box in yellow, red, or green to kind of give you a visual on, are we on point? Are we missing the mark? And then that way, when you're looking at the map from a big bird's eye view, the whole thing, you can see, oh, it looks like on the first 2 lanes, we're all green, but we get a little bit, the hose is kinked up in the middle part because it's got some red spots. And so anyway, I'm just as I looked at your map, I'm thinking that's kind of how I would want to get the visual on where we're at with our data while looking at the map at first glance.
I want this over here. I was going to quickly, if we have a minute, show you something, because we had considered doing that. And one of the issues we had was that the number of people who provide comments is not equal across their level of satisfaction. So people who are dissatisfied are the most likely to comment. People who are dissatisfied have a 90% comment rate. People who are very dissatisfied actually have a little bit less because they're kind of partly on the way out the door, a certain number of them, so they don't even want to tell us anything anymore, and that's very bad. But they also have more in the 75%. People who are happy with your service, and that could be a very large number of people, are less likely to comment. And we can kind of see that data coming in. So that's the only reason why I don't do that, because I know that, because I did look into that. And then I realized that it kind of skewed things. And I'm lucky enough to be a person has the luxury of seeing that evaluation data and the satisfaction data, and then seeing the comments next to it, which a lot of people don't have that luxury to be able to do that at that level. But when I did that, we certainly saw that trend there. And we have some spreadsheets that kind of show you some of those differences was hoping I could pull one up really quickly here. The things kind of want to like come up in the in the wrong window, and I don't want to like run you through all of our stuff.
While you're looking for it, I'm just gonna throw out there that Darlene was also gracious enough to do a reflection series with us, and it's very similar to this conversation, only it's just like an interview with myself and Darlene, and she gave a lot of good information in that too. That's on our website under the customer experience tab. Is it stories, customer stories, or state employee stories? One of those.
Yes, customer
But
story.
we'll be
I'll give
linking that in the future blast as well. So you all will have a link to that interview.
So this is inside parks, and we have our information connected here. So any parks employee can see these and can look at this detail. I'm going to move this off screen because sometimes customers provide comments that might have PII, and I don't want to accidentally reveal anything. Usually they don't, but every once in a while they do. And I need to make sure that we don't have non-staff looking at
While you're getting that together, I just want to acknowledge it is 11:59. If you have to drop, feel free. We want to be respectful of your time, but if you can stay for a couple extra minutes, feel free to do so. We're here.
I don't know what time you're on, pal. I'm at 12:01.
Oh, for real?
Oh, okay.
My computer says 11:59.
So when we're bringing in comments for our staff, we have the ability to do sort by these different very satisfied, dissatisfied. So you can see, and if you looked at, say, dissatisfied, you would see, it's not a very large number, but almost everybody, 90% of your dissatisfied, it's pretty typical across time. It stays at about this 90% level. 90% of people who are dissatisfied are going to comment. Very dissatisfied is interestingly way less. And again, I think it's because they're out the door, and that's a bad thing. We've got satisfied then. It kind of comes in at 64%. And then very satisfied comes in the lowest, even though they may in fact be the majority of your responses. So it's really important when you're looking at tenor of comments that you may not want to do a quantitative analysis of tenor of comments if you're trying to show what the overall customer is looking at. And that's again why I kind of like moved to the quantitative side for some of this and then bring it back in. But everything that we do before we like present it, we test it to make sure is this representing reality? Are there data limitations? Like I mentioned, our reports will show the data limitations, and you can see this here with the CRS data. That's why we rebranded it into an overnight survey data, because we know this is 99.8, but it was 99. It covers between 99.8 and 99.9 coming from this one source. So everything that we do, everything that we present, everything that we analyze on our surveys, I will test it first to make sure is this reflective? Can I test this across other information? And I'm very lucky to have just this huge wealth of data to do that with.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah,
no news is good news, but if there's bad news, you're gonna hear about it.
Yes, so. And that's a good thing. If we definitely want our visitors to tell us about the things that are going wrong, so we can fix them.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Darlene, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone hanging out with us. If you're intrigued as we are seeing a little bit later, just appreciate you, Darlene, for coming back and sharing just how you approach tackling customer journey mapping, and also the real example that you shared on how you all are using that information from what you're collecting and gathering through that customer journey to make improvements is so helpful, especially as we continue these conversations on customer experience and just really expanding that culture in our state. So just appreciate you. David, thank you so much for all your work over there on the eastern side. We'll be looking for that sun soon. And again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We'll be back in May, where we have Let me just make sure we have Cami Nass from Anthrotech. She's the Director of Human-Centered Design there, and she's going to be sharing how we can use human-centered design techniques in our customer experience improvement. So one you don't want to miss. We will be sending some information out soon. And for all of y'all interested in the Power BI user group, we can also include that information on how to join in our post-meeting communication. So
brought up my emails, hoping I could pull it out. And I was like, I don't want to go through my emails in front of
me. Oh, no problem. No rush, Darleen.
Thank you, Darleen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen.